Hello, this is John with Theology Ed. This is part three of the White Noise Explained series, and really I planned on this being a three-part series. It's not going to be. I need more than that. So sorry about that, but this is going to be very interesting. I think this is a fascinating part of the film and has a lot to say to us. Okay, so far in White Noise, of course, we have the family. We have Jack and Babette and their children. Jack and Babette jointly representing, it seems like Babylon, with perhaps the primary characters being the U.S. and the Catholic Church, or the something like that, right? Because there they are underneath, same symbolism, light, light, holding hands, colors the same, all of that. And we've talked about this in greater depth in previous series. And then there's Mr. Gray, who is also Dr. Gray, or Mr. Gray, who is also represents Mr. Bunny. We'll get to that a little bit too, but we've already talked about it. And it started with part one, waves and radiation. Let's enjoy these aimless days while we can. And it turns out you're not going to get them very long. We also, in part one, had our introduction to Dylar, the medicine that is it's experimental, okay, and doesn't function. And you have this B458 or B458, 2458. Who knows exactly how we're supposed to read that, but we've talked about it. And then we had the train crash, or the derailing train colliding with the truck and having a massive explosion, causing leading to the sort of Hitlerization of the United States, having this little flashing Elvis raising his hand, then Hitler raising his hand, and at the same time as this collision happened, you had Murray, the Elvis expert, speaking in a joint lecture with Jack, the Hitler expert, and they were both giving this dual lecture, almost like dueling banjos, right? One talks and the other talks. They were talking sort of over each other and saying similar things, but about their different person, and showing how similar they are and making comparisons. Well, the two collide here, the train and the truck. The truck driver was listening to Elvis at the time of the crash as well, the song Rubbernecking. And so we have this collision, and that leads us to the second part, which was the airborne toxic event, which of course comes from this collision. And despite being in Ohio, we have German flag colors here. And later in the film, we're going to get to Germantown, which is where the climax happens. I don't know exactly what the significance of that is. I'll get to that when we talk more about it, give my ideas in greater depth at that point. But in part two, we saw that, they were trying to act like this was not that big a deal, but turns out they had to be evacuated. It's a toxic event. The airborne toxic event was relatively significant. They were driven out of their homes, forced to go certain places, placed in basically a quarantine / lockdown where they could not leave where they were at for several days. They felt neglected, forgotten, and so on. Along the way, Murray gives Jack a gun and has this interesting talk. Most people there's two types of people in the world, killers and dyers. Most of us are dyers. We don't have the dispositions, the rage to be a killer, yada yada. But think how exciting it is in theory to kill a person. If he dies, you cannot. To kill him is to gain life credit. Who knows? Okay, so these are very interesting things. Again, we talked about that in part two. And here we see Mr. Gray for the first time, his face showing up in the film, but we don't see his face. He's represented as the rabbit. Okay, Mr. Rabbit, as we talked about from other predictive programming. A very powerful person, often related to pharmaceuticals. Okay, and he was related to pharmaceuticals in this film, being the one who is doing the experimental drug Dylar, creating it, testing it on people, and so on, and also consuming it in this film. Now, at the end of section part two, I should say, we saw this eclipse symbolism, the symbol that's familiar to us from I Pet Goat 2, You Should Have Left, Candyman, and many other films. That points to, I believe, the June 21st, 2020 eclipse, followed, by this period of time of transition to the, I say, like the Buck Moon and perhaps Sirius. But it's an interesting question what the symbol is representing, sort of esoterically, as opposed to just temporally. Temporally, I think we have very solid reasons to believe it's pointing to that date, and that seems to be linked to a similar annular eclipse that happened in October 2023. We talked about that in the previous film, our previous part of the series. And so we had this little graphic. So we have our 7 years separated by two eclipses, Great American Eclipses, the August 2017 and April 2024. The exact midpoint was the December 14th, 2020 semi-sextile eclipse, the date on which the rollout happened, and also the Biden Electoral College victory. And we see the linking I've put here between these two eclipses, so that I think in IPECO 2, the classroom calendar, the second half, the part that the rabbit is looking over, the second half is actually also giving us secondary information about 2023, not just 2020, which was fascinating, very clever of them, and so on, and using these eclipses as a connecting point in some way, shape, or form. Okay, now we finally can enter into part 3, and we're going to do the first part of part 3. Now, part 3 is Dylarama, okay, like the Dylar, the drug, ama. So it's like a drama about Dylar and all of them. Now, it's going to begin right after the airborne toxic event has ended. This part is about 50% of the film, a little less than 50% of the film. You're about when you get to part 3, the last part, you're about halfway through the movie. Now, it starts like this. It's comforting to know the supermarket hasn't changed since the toxic event. Murray talking. In fact, the supermarket has only gotten better. You remember that they were talking about building or adding this area over here in the supermarket with the butcher, and actually not just buying packaged meat. You have a real butcher, cutting the meat for you and giving you the amount you need and the types of cuts you want and so on. So an actual butcher, and he's talking about how nice it is to have that, and he says between the unpackaged meat and the fresh bread. So it must also be a little bakery over there or something. Okay. It's like a Persian bazaar. Okay, so here we get our first reference in the film that's looking towards where? Persia or Iran. Now, I mentioned, let's think about the timeline where we're at in the film. The film has taken us at the end of part 2, the airborne toxic event, which happened in the film, filmed in Ohio, pointing to the simulation/real airborne toxic event that happened in East Palestine, Ohio in February 2023, a real event outside the film. That event itself was supposed to be a simulation or model of something that would come afterwards at the time of this date region. And that's we did watch part 2 if you don't understand what I'm talking about, if you don't remember, but we talked about it in depth, and it's a very solid connection, and meaning that what this is actually pointing to, part 2 was pointing to the lead up to the war that would start in October 2023 in the Middle East, over there, Palestine, Israel, Gaza, Hamas versus Israel, and so on. That's the beginning. That's what's leading to this big event. Okay, now, after this starts, okay, we go back, and now we return to the supermarket. This is going to represent a period of transition again, and that's pretty clearly hinted at here in just a second in the dialogue. But after this takes off, the supermarket's only gotten better. We have a butcher area where they're slaughtering animals, and it's like a Persian bazaar. Okay, it looks like where the war is supposed to end up going is to Persia, to Iran. Okay, the slaughter happening there. That'll be part of the slaughter. Now, everything is fine, and will continue to be fine with this war as long as the supermarket doesn't slip. That could point to actual food issues, shortages and so on coming at some point, but also pointing to being a possible reference that everything is fine until the war goes to Persia, when things escalate with Iran. Possible interpretation. I'm speculating a little bit. You can correct me or give me suggestions on how to improve this. But then it continues, and he's going to keep talking. Right as he's talking about this, you have the butcher cuts this. The blood splashes up on this woman, looking very out of place in the scene. But she is, I think, because the conversation says, do you know the Tibetans? I think she's representing, or supposed to be a Tibetan, perhaps not. I don't know. Maybe somewhere else. I'm the only reason I say that is because of the reference immediately after to Tibet, but it may have nothing to do with that. I don't know that she actually looks Tibetan. Doesn't to me, but I'm not sure. Irrelevant, I suppose. If it is, then I don't know what the reference would indicate or what the hint is here, that the slaughter in Persia somehow spreads and makes things get bloody over here somewhere and further east. I'm not positive. I don't want to speculate too much, but take a look at this scene and look at the significance. She is gratuitously in this scene. She is blood splattered on her when a slaughter happens. Aggressive cut happens in the Persian bazaar. Okay, so there's some collateral damage or additional effects that come from this war in Persia or Iran. That's probably coming if that's what this is hinting at. And he says, do you know that the Tibetans believe there is a transitional state? See how I told you it was like transitional? Listen, between death and rebirth, the end of one world and the beginning of a new one, there's a transition. I'm explaining what I think it means. That's what I think when I come here to the supermarket. The supermarket is a waiting place. It recharges us spiritually. So this supermarket is symbolically very important in the film. It's the transitional state. When the airborne toxic event, which points to the war in the Middle East, starts, everything's fine as long as the supermarket's fine and the war hasn't gone to Persia, perhaps, Iran. Once it does, you're on your way to the death of the existing world and the rebirth of the new one. I think we're getting something like that is hinted at here, as if that's the point at which the war becomes, I guess, truly World War III. I'm not sure. Okay? That's what I think when I come here. The supermarket is a waiting place. It recharges us spiritually. And so, when we go through this and we're trying to interpret everything in the supermarket allegorically, it's not a stretch. We're actually given warrant to do that. He's like, it's a gateway. It's a gateway. Listen. Look how bright. Look how full of psychic data, waves, and radiation. All the letters and numbers are here. All the colors of the spectrum. All the voices and sounds. All the code words and ceremonial phrases. We just have to know how to decipher it. You can't get a clearer hint that we're supposed to be deciphering something in the supermarket. Okay? We're not supposed to just see them hanging out in a supermarket and buying food and having interesting conversations. We're supposed to be uncovering something here. And so I think what we're doing so far is completely justified in when he says it's a Persian bazaar. He's not just using a metaphor here. He's trying to tell us something that we're supposed to decipher over there at the butcher area. Now, as the conversation goes, we get a continuation. How's that lovely woman of yours? So I guess some sort of representation of the U.S. He says, I've been distracted preparing for the Hitler conference. Let me see. She's been different somehow since the event. We've suffered a collective trauma, Murray says. She wears her sweatsuit, all the time. She stares out of windows and cries for no reason. I just don't know how to help her. And I've been distracted myself preparing for the Hitler conference, and Murray asks about the kids next. I wonder what the significance of this is, incidentally. After this war gets started in the Middle East, before the slaughter in Iran, it's like, or maybe even after that, whatever Babette is representing in Babylon, wears her swimsuit all the time, stares out the windows and cries for no reason. Some sort of something bad seems to happen to her. I'm not sure, or at least that's how she's handling this conflict. Not active, passive at first. I'm not sure. And I've been distracted myself preparing for the Hitler conference, and he says, and the kids back in school and so on. Okay. Briefly talks about the doctors. He lies to doctors. Murray does too. They don't know why they lie to doctors, to sort of, I guess, hide whatever they view as their defects, right? And they don't want to hear the news of their impending doom or death. And then we move to another discussion, which I think is fascinating. Do you know the Elvis struggle you helped me with? It turns out, tragically, I would have won anyway. So at the time, Murray had asked Jack to do this dual lecture with him, so that, or to come and do something, so that he would bring his, reputation as a scholar. And the Hitler Studies program was, cutting edge apparently at the time, or something, the way the film represents it. And Jack is the Hitler expert, and Murray wanted to be the same to Elvis, but he had to compete with this guy Cotsakis, and Jack was invited to go help him win. But it turns out Jack helped, but he would have won anyways, because what happened? Cotsakis, my rival, is no longer in the land of the living. Now, I don't know much about Cotsakis here. Looked up the meaning of the name and so on. I'm not into the gematria stuff really a whole lot, because I'm not. I find a lot of it being too difficult to nail down precisely enough to make a concrete claim that I know this is what it signifies. I will point out, though, that the reverse value here is 119, and that is important in the supermarket. Let me show you at the end. At the end of the supermarket, at the end of the film, people think it's a really clever ending, right? They think, wow, what a funny ending. And so, it's like a music video of them dancing in the supermarket, and just looks fun. Okay. And it's more than that. Okay. That is like a ritual dance. Okay. If you watch the scene, the dance at the end, dancing at the end, and you can look this up on YouTube and just see that part if you want. People are dancing, and the camera is moving left to right. Okay, and they're raising things, looks like bombs and weapons and so on. Okay, and they keep going to the right. People dancing here. You see these people going, and it looks kind of fun. They keep going to the right until, and you see, you even get your hazmat guy in there. On the way, this is all happening on the way to the 9/11 event. Okay, so this is where they head. They're going, and we get all these prices on the wall. Very fascinating. Interesting, I don't see a 199 or a 911 or anything here until right here. There it is, 119. Now, this, with this guy, is where we stop moving to the right. We will, at this point, begin to shift directions. He's going to go right in front of the 119. That's the turning point. And then he's going to start running this way, and these people all start to act like something blew up. And then the rest of the thing goes the other direction, and people die, and they're still dancing, but the idea is there's something destructive happened. It's the big change. Watch here. So let me. I have a little. Here, 1 second. I'm gonna go ahead and show you right here. There it is. Okay, there he is. So we were going that way. Then he gets right in front, and now watch. We get in front of the 119. He starts running the other way. They're looking like, and it's going to go. See, camera to the right. Pause right in front of the 119, and then we turn the other direction, and the whole dance scene now goes the other way. Okay, now say we get these people like she looks like she's about to fall, and okay, the people are dying now in this area. They're dying. Okay, after the 119, so it could be 11-9 or 9/11 or metaphorically just the next 9/11. Okay, we're going to get the deaths coming and going back that direction. And that's at the end of the film. Now I'm going back to the Cotsakis conversation. What happened to him? He was lost in the surf off Malibu during term break. I found out an hour ago, came right here. I'm sorry to tell you, particularly because of your condition, because he's supposed to be dying. Poor Cotsakis, lost in the surf. That enormous man. Now remember, in the supermarket, we're supposed to be deciphering the words. Who is Cotsakis? He might be the 11-9 or 9/11 event. Okay, whatever that means. It's a big event that turns the direction of the whole war and conflict, and maybe even brings Iran into it or whatever. He was big, all right, enormously so. He must have weighed 300 pounds, easily. Dead. A big man like that. See, this conversation's absurd. People call it an absurdist comedy. They need to make it an absurdist comedy as a genre to, hide the fact that the conversation has a different purpose, because this is so absurd. Why would somebody talk so much a big man like that dead? Big people die. This isn't some great mystery. So what's interesting here is Cotsakis probably signifies something other than just a big guy dying. Okay? He's the big 9/11 event dying. Okay? And what I suspect, because he died off the surf, and they're going to show Cotsakis in his imagination just in a few seconds as he fades out of the supermarket. We're going to fade out of the supermarket by him imagining Cotsakis off the surf, this big man surfing, floating on top of the water. I suspect he may be representing maybe an aircraft carrier or something, or a huge ship, military ship, a warship, something like that. They get sunk. I don't know. Maybe it'll be something out in the Persian Gulf related to oil that's brought down. But there are something big seems to go down off the surf, perhaps. They're out in the ocean. Maybe that the metaphor goes beyond that, or the allegory goes beyond that. I'm not sure. I'm speculating, but I do suspect Cotsakis, that big man, so enormous, and then to die, so big, people thought it was almost impossible to sink him. Okay? He went down. And that's a big deal. Okay? And maybe, going back to that gematria, now that we know that the dance guy, he's at the 9/11 when he goes back, or the 119, right? And with Cotsakis' name in the reverse direction, being 119, might be a way to point out that Cotsakis symbolizes something associated with the quote-unquote 9/11 event that will escalate the war. I'm not sure. So then Murray makes another one of his observations, Oh, and he also said it's better not knowing them when they die. It's better not knowing them when they die, but it's better them than us. Very cold comments, right? He says things that you shouldn't really say, but perhaps some people would think, to be so enormous than to die, I can picture him so clearly. Okay, maybe, Murray says, maybe once we stop denying death, we can proceed calmly to die. We simply walk toward the sliding doors. Notice, walk toward the sliding doors, leaving the supermarket. This is our death represented. Now, as he says that, Jack, you see him looking distraught, emotional. He is going to just focus on all this white noise. He gets a little, the camera work blurry. You hear the cash register dinging and all this noise, the bags, a newspaper opening, and so on, making noise. And you hear the announcer. Now, this is, remember, keywords in the supermarket, keywords. Now, these are products. Now, cool, I believe they're all products. Crush, I'll explain this in a second. Crush, Jolt, High C. Now, cool, something is cooled. Maybe it's the weather, maybe it's winter. Now, winter. Or now, cool, maybe, yeah, I don't know. You guys come up with the ideas. Crush, Jolt, something happens. That's a big jolt. Okay. Then High C. That's the product High C back in the 80s. I don't know if they sell it anymore. But High C in military language represents high intensity conflict. Okay. This is the stages when, and perhaps the stages up to the high intensity conflict. When you enter full blown massive war. Okay. That's what, but he's hearing all these noises, and it's like he says, he's thinking, what if this represents death? The white noise in the film, as the name of the film, represents death. You'll see this here made explicit in just a second. While we're up here looking, we have Russian missile shoots down UFO. That was from 2022 in the film. Remember, right around the same time as that train crash in East Palestine, what happened? We had all the quote-unquote UFO sightings over the U.S., and they finally shot one down. All right? Okay. And then you can take a look there if you see anything else. There's little things like 660F, and F is the sixth digit, or sixth letter of the alphabet, so 666, or, there could be a number of things in here. But I'm not going to try to overthink that. At the time. Here we have Crush, Jolt, High C, Cash Register Dinging, Sniff. Right, we're getting all of this Tide. The Nancy, Senka, Nancy. I'm not sure what that means. I'd like somebody to maybe help me out understanding that, because I've tried a few different things and I just haven't come up with an explanation yet. But go towards the sliding door. I mean, I just showed you a lot of scenes, but that was all very quick. He's still listening to Murray. Murray had just said, what if death is, we can proceed calmly to die. We just walk calmly toward the sliding doors, right? And what does he see at the sliding doors? There is Mr. or Dr. Gray. Mr. Rabbit, Mr. Gray. Okay, there he is at the sliding doors. They open, and he's there. And he's representing death and the one who will take out Babylon. Okay. And Jack says, at this point, what if death is nothing but sound? You hear it forever, sound all around. And Murray chimes in, uniform. White. So you see that death is being symbolized in white noise by the movie White, by White Noise, the movie name. White noise is representing death. So that this is why whenever you get close to death, or scenes about death, or scenes when there's a threat of death, or where there's an impending death coming, or something like that, or even symbolically it represents death in this film, pay attention when you watch the film. You will hear it go to white noise, or him looking at a TV that's all staticky. and just generating white noise. And that's because that is what it is symbolizing. He says, what if death is nothing but sound? And Murray's like, white uniform sound, white noise. That's all it is. And while they're looking, Jack is looking towards the sliding doors, which also are representing death. We see basically death itself. Mr. Gray, who functions as Mr. Rabbit, coming through the doors. And here we're going to see him come in and treat Jack completely dismissively, flicking his cart away like he's nothing and going to be thrown out like a pest. Okay, as if he's some sort of a nuisance fly. Okay, he comes in, here he is, and there it is. Look, watch. Boom. Just treats him like he doesn't exist. You know, he's taken his Jack's wife, right? He's giving them deadly drugs, and he is giving them deadly drugs, Babette, and at the end of the day, he has no regard for them, just dismisses them. Okay, now that's I think an indication of where the film is headed. We'll see later on that Mr. Gray, while he does get shot, I suspect that the film is trying to communicate he survives, I think, while Jack and Babette do not. Now, I know that's going to be a little bit of a controversial take because in the film, they go back home at the end. But I believe that going back home is representing their heaven. Because at the beginning, it talks about, these aimless days, cherishing them and so on. Why? Because the film is secular, does not believe in an afterlife, and it's saying these are your heaven. Cherish these days now while you have them. Let the days be aimless forever, right? Enjoy this now because when you die, there's nothing else. This is your heaven, and you're going to die. So enjoy it while you have it. And so when they die in the hospital, we'll talk about it, and then go back home, it's symbolically representing they've gone to heaven. And it's like returning back to the life they had. But either way, I think Mr. Gray, because there's also a statement that he'll be fine. Mr. Gray's going to make it. And they then, look like they're taken off to heaven. All right. I forgot what the significance of these are. There is a significance, and it slipped my mind. And when I think of it, I will hopefully be able to add it to another video or in a comment or somewhere. Either way, so that at the end of this scene in the supermarket, Jack, as it fades away, we sort of get a glimpse into Jack's mind, where he's thinking about Cotsakis on the surf, about to die there. And then we go to the doctor's office where Dr. Lou is going to take care of Jack. And here we get another reference to something related to Persian, the Persian Gulf. So, of course, Jack has some symptoms, elevated potassium, which may indicate that he's been, suffering some sort of adverse reaction to the toxic event that he was exposed to, the airborne toxic event. And Dr. Lou detects that Jack was probably lying to him and hiding the fact that he was exposed, and is going to send him off to get him some testing at Autumn Harvest Farms. And Dr. Lou's like, they have gleaming new equipment, like it's something special. I'm not sure what the significance that he emphasizes it. And Jack uses this opportunity with the doctor to ask about Dylar. Have you heard of Dylar? And we get the most absurd, again, answer. Is that an island in the Persian Gulf? one of those oil terminals crucial to the survival of the West. See, whatever's going on related to Persia in the supermarket, the Persian Bazaar where the slaughter happens, at the butcher, okay, that seems to get blood on neighboring countries in some way, shape, or form, possibly. Um, and then the Cotsakis conversation with that enormous man, someone so big dying, something big in the ocean being taken out, I think is what's being hinted at there. Um, and then now we get an island in the Persian Gulf, which is where you would end up having you're probably an aircraft carrier or something, military warships and so on, out in that area for the conflict. Um, and then there's also oil terminals and so on, I guess, out there as well. So I'm not sure what the great big thing is that'll be brought down, if that's what's being pointed to at all. But it sure sounds like something over there in the Middle East, in the Persian Gulf, will somehow probably be or possibly be a 9/11 event that then leads to a full-on assault of Iran or attack on Iran or war with Iran, which now takes us to the high intensity conflict, that the high C, which comes after the Jolt and the crush or whatever. All right, so that's where I'm going to leave it. I know there's a lot more left in part 3 of the film, but this is part 3 of our series, and we'll keep going with part 4 and following after this. So like, subscribe, share. Thanks for watching, and blessings. Take care.